The parents of Maria Francesca Lopez, or Francisca as she was known, came from 2 continents. Her father, Damaso Lopez, was from the Basque region of northern Spain. Her mother, Maria del Carmen Severina Ruiz de Esparza, had family roots in Durango, Mexico. Her family was in San Miguel del Vado before 1811. Maria del Carmen was most likely born in San Miguel del Vado. This is where the Santa Fe Trail crossed the Pecos River. Francisca Lopez Kimball was my great-great-grandmother on my mother's side. In 1897, at the request of her daughter, Francesca Isabel Kimball Douglas, Francisca wrote down the dramatic story of her early life. Francisca's story, in her own words, was passed down to me in my mother's family papers. Her recounting of her early life is filled with specific memories and places. Over the years, I have been able to explore and verify many of the events and places which she described. One vexing mystery is her claim that she was born in Chihuahua, Mexico. We can find no evidence that this is true. Another mystery is the striking photo of Francisca with her hair down, holding a fan and wearing an open-neck style. This is a most unusual pose for any woman in front of a camera at any time during the 19th century. Did she sneak out of the convent school while the nuns were praying? Francisca's childhood and adolescence were filled with drama and very much influenced by the turbulence of 1840s Santa Fe. She lost her mother at age 6. Her father placed her at the Academy of the Visitation Convent School in St. Louis. There she acquired a very good education. Among other things, she was encouraged to write letters. Some of Francisca's letters have survived, and you will hear and see them today. Francisca's father, Damaso Lopez, was a major figure in the commerce of New Mexico from 1820 to 1852. He was born in the Basque region of northern Spain in 1793. Around 1820, he and his brother opened a trading house in Chihuahua. They provided goods to retail merchants, including those at the far northern end of the Camino Real. By 1820, he was in Santa Fe. He was involved in mining, freighting, merchandising, real estate development, and livestock raising and trading. He was a wealthy, highly successful businessman and entrepreneur in both Mexico and New Mexico. By the time of his death, we know that he had traveled on the Camino Real, the Santa Fe Trail, and the Spanish Trail. He was the human version of the New Mexico state bird. Francisca's mother, Maria del Carmen Severina Ruiz de Esparza, had roots in Aguas Calientes and Durango, Mexico. This is the Esparza family tree. In 1835, Damaso Lopez and Maria del Carmen were married. They had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. The oldest, Trinidad, was born in Abiquiu in 1836. Melquiades was also born in Abiquiu and baptized in Santa Fe in 1838. Francisca, in her own words, says she was born in Chihuahua. However, we can find no baptismal record for her. Most likely, she was born in northern Mexico in Abiquiu or San Miguel del Vado. Francisca's younger brother, was born at San Miguel del Vado in 1844. Maria del Carmen, the mother of these 4 children, died of unknown causes in Santa Fe, probably in 1847, at about 28 years of age. Her death came within a year or so of the American conquest of New Mexico by General Stephen Watts Kearny and the Army of the West in August 1846. We know that for at least 2 years after the arrival of the American militia, disease was rampant in Santa Fe, and that many soldiers and locals died. Now we will listen to Francisca's story as told to her daughter in 1897, when Francisca was 56 years old.
Don Damaso Lopez, Don Anastasio Sandoval, and Don Manuel Alvarez were 3 Spanish gentlemen and great friends. They left their country to seek other climes. They visited the United States, then went to Old Mexico, where my father and Mr. Sandoval married. Mr. Alvarez never married. He lived with my father until we children were old enough to be brought to the United States to be educated. I was born in Chihuahua and baptized at the old cathedral there. I had 4 godmothers and 4 godfathers. When I was young, too young to remember, we moved to Santa Fe, Mexico. When I was 6 years old, we lost our mother, but I remember her and the house we lived in, a 1-story house with many rooms and a court in the center. When we lost our mother, Mr. Alvarez, my father's closest friend, advised my father to bring us to the States and place my 3 brothers and self at boarding school. I well remember the conversation between my father and his friend, though I was but 6 years old, saying that we must be brought up as gentlemen and lady fitted to our stations and birth. A few months after this conversation, we children found ourselves in a covered wagon with an escort of soldiers to protect us from the Indians, bound for the United States. We traveled 6 months through the plains. The first place I remember to have stopped was a town in Missouri called Independence. We visited a friend of my father's there, Mr. Waldo, who had lived some years in Mexico.
We know from a letter written by Damaso that they arrived in Independence, Missouri in May 1850. Here is the letter which Damaso wrote to his good friend Manuel Alvarez in Santa Fe in May of 1850.
Independencia, Missouri, May 17, 1850. Dear countryman and friend, well, I've arrived here without much new. The children arrived all happy. They made the whole journey and are well. We arrived at the Plaza of Independence. I had intended to stop at El Mesón, but Mr. Waldo, who already knew I'd arrived, sent for me to come stop at his ranch house directly. So here I am. Here I've stopped where the doctor so generously has offered me anything I need. The day after tomorrow I am going to visit the kids at the school where they are for 2 days, and then take the little girl to St. Louis without delay. It's admirable, the immigration there is to California from these states. The risk here. It was full of immigrants and their animals, all kinds they told me. 15,000 carts and about 100,000 men. When I saw them, it made me think of Napoleon's army when in the year '08 they went in to invade Spain, with the small difference that these went in small parties. The most I'll be in this place is 1.5 months, and then I'll go to another land. Say hello to my friend Dr. Benito. Without further ado and space to tell you any more, I remain your faithful servant that kisses your hand, Damaso Lopez.
My father left 2 of my brothers, Melquiades and Francisco, in Independence at boarding school. Then we came to St. Louis. I was placed in the Visitation Convent, my brother Trinidad at the Jesuit College, my father saying to me as he bade me goodbye, "Francisca, you are to learn everything that the nuns can teach you. When you have finished your education, then I will take you to Spain to see my old home."
Francisca was very fortunate to have been educated at the Academy of the Visitation. Not only did she acquire knowledge in many different subjects, she made many friends. Here is a letter she wrote to her father after she had been at the school for about 2 years. At this time, she was not yet 11 years old.
Academy of the Visitation, St. Louis, April 22nd, 1852. My dear Father, it is with great pleasure that I write these few lines to you to let you know that I am well and happy. I think a great deal about you, my dear Father, and especially when I am going to bed at night. I always say a little prayer for you and for my little brothers too. I wish I could see you so much, and I do hate to think that we are so far apart. I have something so good to tell you which will please you, I know it. It is this: I am preparing for my first communion, which I hope to make on Trinity Sunday. I will think of you then, Pa, and I will pray for you. And I beg you to pray for me that I may receive my God worthily. I will not tell you what class I am in this time, because in my next letter maybe I can say I am in the 5th class. I think I am improving in my music very fast, and like it very much. My hand is aching, for I have written so much, so goodbye, and don't forget your little Francisca.
Now we back up just a little to remember what Damaso said to Francisca. Francisca, you are to learn everything that the nuns can teach you. When you have finished your education, then I will take you to Spain to see my old home.
These were the last words I heard my father say. He started from St. Louis to visit California in search of gold, and on his way was killed by the Indians.
We know that Damaso did not go directly to California from St. Louis. We also know that he was not killed by Indians. He died in 1852, 2 years after leaving Francisca at the convent school. We know that he died while on his way to California with 4,800 sheep. Most likely the cause was heat stroke or dehydration. We have a copy of his obituary published in the August 28, 1852 issue of the Los Angeles Star. After the death of Damaso Lopez, Manuel Alvarez was made the guardian of the 4 Lopez children.
Mr. Alvarez was then made our guardian. A few years after we lost our father, Mr. Alvarez came to St. Louis to see how I and my brothers were doing and to see how much we were learning. When he saw me, he said the same thing my father had said before saying goodbye to me. Francisca, when you have learned all that the nuns can teach you, I will take you to Spain, and you will never go back to Mexico. This made a great impression on my young mind. I had determined that I would never go back to Mexico.
Academy of the Visitation, St. Louis, December 18, 1853. My dear guardian, it is with great pleasure that I write you these few lines, as I know you are ever anxious to hear from me. I am quite well, my dear guardian, and am improving very fast in my English and music. I have been very uneasy about my brothers, having written to them several times, and not as yet received any reply. I am in hopes that you will come this year to see me, for I am so anxious to see you and my dear brothers once more. I suppose you have not forgotten Donanciana Waldo. She is so kind to me. She is also improving. I know you will be delighted to hear her play on the piano. She is very kind to me and treats me very kindly. She makes all my dresses. but this is only a small part of what I have to be grateful to her for. When you write, please tell me when you intend to come and see me. If you do, I hope you will bring my dear brothers with you. I will now close by bidding you goodbye. I remain your affectionate F. Lopez.
Mr. Alvarez died a few years after he came to see me, and Mr. Sandoval was appointed our guardian. My brother Francisco married Mr. Sandoval's daughter, and it was arranged that I was to marry his son as soon as I finished my education. I never forgot my father's last words to me, and determined, if I could, never to go back to Mexico. While at school, I made many warm, dear friends, among them Pélagie Berthold. She insisted I should spend the first year after I left the convent with her, which I did, and there I loved and married my husband.
Francisco was very fortunate to have been taken in by the Berthold family. They were very prominent and hosted many social events at their mansion. This is where Francisca met her future husband, Benjamin Kimball. On June 28, 1860, at the age of 18, Francisca married Benjamin at the Berthold mansion. Benjamin Kimball was born in St. Louis on May 26, 1838. He was a descendant of early French settlers in St. Louis. His great-grandfather on his mother's side was Antoine Pierre Soulard, the general surveyor of the old Spanish territory, extending from the Gulf of Mexico to Alaska. He was a college-educated and successful businessman. He was in the insurance business, as was his father. The Kimball family grew quickly. By the time Francisca was 30 years old, she had 6 children. Ultimately, she had 11 children, her youngest born when she was 49. Here is a photograph of 4 of Francisca's daughters. My great-grandmother is on the left. She died in 1938, 20 years before I was born. She married Walter Bond Douglas, a Harvard-educated lawyer who became a judge and a president of the Missouri Historical Society, now the Missouri History Museum in St. Louis. Here's a photograph of my grandfather, Francis Lopez Douglas, as a young boy. These are 3 of the Kimball daughters, Francisca's daughters, on the right, with their cousin, Nettie Beauregard, on the left. They are sitting on the steps at Casa Alvarez in Florissant, Missouri. Casa Alvarez is a wood-frame French colonial-style house listed on the National Register of Historic Places as among the oldest houses in St. Louis County. According to its nomination for the register, it serves as a last link with the Spanish occupation of the Upper Louisiana Territory. Casa Alvarez was originally constructed in 1790 for Eugenio Alvarez, a Spaniard who served as military storekeeper under the Spanish lieutenant governor of Upper Louisiana. He became acquainted with early St. Louis settlers Pierre Laclede and Pierre Chouteau, among others. Mary Kimball, one of Francisca's daughters, bought the house with her husband in 1914. It was passed down to another family member who sold it to my parents in 1958, 2 months before I was born. I lived my first 8 years in Casa Alvarez. Here's a photograph of Francisca and Benjamin Kimball around 1895. Francisca died in November of 1907. Both of the obituaries published in the St. Louis newspapers tell of Francisca's death at age 66 as being caused by blood poisoning, resulting from an attempt to remove a corn or a callus from her foot. She is remembered as a social leader and the daughter of a Spanish family. She's buried in Calvary Cemetery in St. Louis. Established in 1854, it contains the graves of many noted persons who were identified with the very beginnings of St. Louis. Her grave is in Benjamin Kimball's family plot, under the Soulard obelisk. That's a picture of me when I found the gravestone in 2014. In conclusion, I would like to say that although we know some of the information from Francisca's story of her early life is open for questioning, I think it's very fortunate that her daughter Francesca Isabel Kimball Douglas asked her to share her recollections of her tragic and eventful childhood and her education at the Visitation Convent School.